Hey, this is Robbie Nicolaisen, and you're listening to the Eat Y'all podcast.
Welcome to the Eat Y'all podcast, where we discuss the struggles and successes of the farmers, food producers, and chefs who are working to get better ingredients into restaurants today and to ensure their availability in the future.
Thanks to our friends at the Georgia Pecan Growers Association for their support of this episode of the Eat Y'all podcast. To learn more about where to buy the most nutritious and delicious nuts on the planet, in our opinion, visit georgiapecan.org. That's georgiapecan.org.
Welcome back to the Eat Y'all podcast. I'm your host, Andy Chapman, and I know we have some new listeners who found us through our journey. So I want to really start off by thanking all of you who have liked and shared these episodes and people who have given us ratings and reviews. It's been great. And you guys are the wind beneath our wings or something like that. They do mean a lot and they help people find us. So that means a ton. All right. So let's get back to it. Marianna, you're here again.
I'm here again.
And I'm going to go ahead and dub you a co-host since you've been doing this with me all the way since 2020.
Yeah, really long time.
All right, Marianna. So it's great to be back in the new year. What are we doing this week?
Well, it looks like we are down in South Georgia for this one. I think you would probably agree this was the prettiest setting we've ever recorded at. We were there with RG Lamar, a Georgia pecan producer in Southern Georgia, and Chef Robbie Nicolaisen, a great friend of Eat Y'all's from Auburn, Alabama.
Yes, man, that was fun. And we got to be down there during pecan harvest. And, you know, people always joke about how the sausage is made, but we got to see how the pecans make it from the trees to the plate, to the dessert plate, even to the beer. So you want to do a little quick pecan trivia before we start down the main nut track? Or the nut main track? The train track about the nuts.
I like that you tried to have a pun there and tripped all over yourself. I think we should definitely leave that in
It's nuts trying to make jokes about pecans, but people in the pecan world, they do have a lot of pecan puns.
They do have a lot of nutty jokes.
Nutty humor.
Yes.
All right. So what's the best tasting nut?
All right. So in my opinion, and I've actually done a lot of taste testing, I really do personally love the Georgia grown pecans. They really do have a tremendous flavor that makes me very happy in both my desserts. And I love them on salads. I love what you do with them with the spiced pecans and throwing them on a green salad, which is how I'll be eating them this week. It's the first week of the new year and the healthier eating resolutions that have happened around here.
She'll be doing the nuts on some salads. All right. What nut has the most antioxidants of any nut?
So that is another reason they will be topping my salad this week. But the Georgia grown pecans have a tremendous amount of antioxidants. It's not even a close race with any of the other snacking nuts. And so as we're all being very not diet conscious, but health conscious, putting things in our bodies that fuel us and keep us healthy in these times, definitely go grab some of those Georgia grown pecans.
There you go. And the antioxidant chart is kind of funny because it's like blip, 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 whoop, way up on that chart.
It was really surprising. It was good to know something so tasty was so healthy.
You know, I don't know what a pro-oxidant is, but these are definitely anti, and I'm for that.
Yeah, I think we can be for the antioxidants.
All right. So are you ready to jump in? We'll have a little more trivia in there with RG and Robbie. But let's jump in with RG Lamar, who's the president of Stuckey's, which he's going to tie into the pecan world. If you've never been to a Stuckey's gas station, those are an incredible thing all over the country, but really kind of an iconic gas station chain here in the South. And, of course, we'll have our good friend, Chef Robbie Nicolaisen from Auburn, Alabama. And Robbie, we got to introduce you twice, so I hope you enjoy this.
Well, let's give a shout out to Robbie's restaurant too. The Hound over in Auburn is a really fantastic place and a friend of many, many of our growers and producers. Robbie's done a great job through the years of using ingredients directly from farms. So I think you'll find this interview really interesting.
And here's a little tease. Robbie's going to announce something in the interview for a new concept coming in 2021 if the world doesn't shut down. So
there you go.
Y'all have to listen for that.
Well, let's get to it.
Let's do it. Welcome to this edition of the Eat Y'all podcast. I'm your host, Andy Chapman, and it's not every time that I get to sit in a incredible area with gunfire in the background and leaves falling off trees, looking at the river. What river is this, RG?
This is the Okmulgee River.
Okmulgee. We're getting our geographical lessons going, but this is probably the prettiest setting we've had to do the podcast, and we're in, I would call it South Georgia, but super South Georgians would go, oh, you're almost up to Macon, sort of. But we're down here outside of Hawkinsville, Georgia, and we've been spending some time with the folks from Georgia Pecans, Front Porch Pecans, RG Lamar, and our good friend Robbie Nicolaisen from Auburn, Alabama, the chef over there at the Hound, and many other projects in the near future. So
to be determined.
Welcome both of y'all to the podcast. It's really fun to get to be here in this setting and get to do this.
Thank you. Yeah, glad to be here. It's a lot of fun.
So we're going to talk about pecans today, and specifically Georgia pecans, because we are in Georgia. And if you're into pecans, word on the street is, and RG, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Georgia is the number one pecan producing state in the number one pecan producing nation. So this is like the New England Patriots of the pecan world.
Of the pecan world. Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
They're undefeated, right? I mean, not that New England is undefeated this year at this time, but I just think of all the Super Bowl rings. That's all in recent era.
We got a lot of championship pennants up on the wall here in Georgia when it comes to pecan production. That's true.
So talk about that. Why is Georgia such a good pecan producer? And what kind of led to that as being this big crop? I know it's I heard yesterday it's one of the top 10 ag crops in the state.
So first of all, Georgia just has a great climate for pecans. We get a lot of rain around here, which is important. Pecans like water. They're native to the Mississippi River Delta. Their climate there was frequent flooding, so they like to get wet roots periodically. So we've got a good climate in that respect. And I think Georgia got to be such a big pecan producing region back in the early 20th century. And I'm a little foggy on the exact details of this, but a lot of wealthy people up north were investing in pecan orchards down here at that time. I think it had something to do with their ability to insure both the land and the trees, and there may have been some Ponzi schemes involved in all that. I'm not really sure.
Hey, we love a good timber Ponzi scheme in Mississippi. So
But that was kind of the genesis of it, and that's why we grow more pecans here than anywhere else in the world.
Let's talk about Robbie being a chef. We brought Robbie here because he's got a wealth of knowledge when it comes to flavor and texture and all of those different components that make up something that's actually tasty. And we were in several different orchards today. We saw lots of different parts of the process. But when you talk about the flavor of a Georgia pecan, what are the factors that really influence that, and how do you, as a farmer, impact that?
So there's a few things I pay attention to if I'm tasting a pecan. One is going to be the texture. So we see a lot of variation between varieties, between, how oily or buttery they are versus a drier type texture. And then you also, the softness or the crispness of the texture. Texture is a really big part, but then you get into also a scale of kind of bitterness and sweetness. So yeah, I mean, some varieties just really hit it out of the park on all of that, and others, we were talking earlier about the one called Moneymaker, which makes no money for anyone at any time in any place. It's probably the worst variety you could ask for. But yeah, so there's a big range. That's kind of what we look at.
Robbie, when you're sourcing any kind of product in your kitchen, what are the factors that you use to decide, okay, this is a possible one. No. Yeah. I mean, what are you trying to do when you're going through what some purveyor walks in the back door with?
Well, I guess it starts with appearance, first of all, and then, move on to mouthfeel. Before today, I knew there was, a few varieties of pecans out there. I didn't know it was as vast as it is, and it was large. And I have noticed, like, you can definitely tell the difference between some. Some are more, like you said, bitter or almost have like a gritty texture, like once you start chewing them. And then other ones, I think Andy, you mentioned this before about the creaminess of them. And so those I try to seek out because, it's a better mouthfeel. It's technology.
In case
right?
anyone's wondering, that's the beer timer.
We're going to get to the beer in a minute, but that's just to let you know that it's on its way. So,
which happen to be made with pecans.
Yeah,
right? So.
There's a pecan tie-in. We're going to get to that. That's a little teaser there. We can get into that. So, and I think the appearance is a funny thing because we on the picnic table behind us, there are 2 bags of pecans, and I don't know if y'all brought that out as a prop or if y'all were going to make a pie out of both of them or what the plan was. But one of them is really dark, and one of them is what I'm used to eating now from Georgia. Talk about that, RG. What's going on over there in those bags?
Yeah, so I brought those just to point out a few things. One bag is grown in our farms in Georgia. It's desirables. It's this year's crop, and it's been stored properly. The other bag came from a Mexican farm and has been stored in cellophane without any kind of refrigeration or any kind of nitrogen flush in the bag. And it really is, you can see looking at the bags, it's a pretty stark difference. Difference in color. You can easily tell the color of the nuts that haven't been stored properly. That's something that's important to me to communicate to people because so often what's available to us in the grocery store or on the food service truck are pecans that haven't been stored properly. People often don't know the right way to store and handle pecans. And so, any pecan is going to taste a lot better if it's stored and handled properly. It's just a fact that the desirable variety that's grown in Georgia is exceptional. And that's the other thing you can see. It's a larger kernel, and it's a brighter color, and it's a sweeter flavor. And is butterier a word? I'm not sure. If we'll have to look to the chef on that.
He's nodding.
He's nodding.
Yeah, it sounds good.
More
to me.
buttery.
Yeah,
I don't know. You can go different ways on that. Yeah. And there's a new development with, and maybe in varieties other than desirables, but the Georgia Grand. What is that all about?
Yeah, so there's actually an interesting story with that. I went to Taiwan in September of last year to try to peddle my wares as a pecan producer. And the ag commissioner from the state of Georgia came with us to help promote pecans. So we're over there. We're meeting with Taiwanese pecan buyers, and I've got my desirables out on the table, and they're looking at them like, we've never seen anything like this. What is this? And I said, well, that's, they're mammoth halves, which in the pecan industry, that's the term that we use for the largest size standard that we have. And if you want to get into the technicality, a mammoth half is any pecan half that counts between 200 and 250 per pound. That's a mammoth half. So there's nothing above that. And so if it's fewer than 200 halves per pound, it's just been lumped into mammoth halves. So I said, well, they're mammoth halves. I said, no, they're not. We buy mammoth halves already. They don't look anything like this. This is a lot nicer than the mammoth half. And so a light bulb kind of went off in my head and in Gary Black, the ag commissioner's head, that Georgia really does have a special and unique product. And it's not fair that there's not a standard to represent that. That doesn't help anyone.
Right.
So Commissioner Black and I came back. He, of course, has a lot more influence than I do, but he kind of got the work done. And so the state of Georgia now has an official specification called Georgia Grand for pecans that count lower than 200 per pound and have that bright color and good flavor.
And that's the size of a grown man's thumb almost. Like
That's
the big,
about right.
From the knuckle up, like the big boys.
Like if you like BB King's thumb is kind of what I'm thinking, yeah.
Or Robbie's thumb.
Or Robbie's thumb for that matter.
I mean, it's kind of like, what's the biggest shrimp you buy, Robbie? Is it a jumbo? Is that a 8, 10, or 10 count or something?
I typically don't use the larger shrimp. I like a little bit smaller size. They tend to be a little bit sweeter. So we use a Gulf Carp when available, but definitely domestic And it's usually around 2130 size.
2130s.
Mm.
Well, in the pecan world, I'm thinking like the correlation there of like the big shrimp where you know 8-10 is a pound is kind of what you've got on the Georgia Grand thing. That's pretty neat. So that will give Georgia pecan growers the ability to actually put themselves in a category that people can find truly the premium top of the line. Yeah, I guess I'm trying to figure out like, okay, so if you call everything a steak and then there's a dry aged prime ribeye, whatever, and you're like, well, that's a steak too, but being able to actually point out,
these is not like the
wait
others,
a
right?
second, this one is $42 before I've even aged it per pound, and you're talking about the Waffle House steak, and they're both steak.
And that is a reality too that I need to be upfront about it. Georgia, because of the climate, our advantage is rainfall. So other sources of pecans are Mexico, New Mexico, Arizona, West Texas. There's a lot of arid climate sources. And the advantage they have is sunlight. A lot of those are at higher altitudes, so there's less atmosphere between them and the sun, and they just get more days of sun in the year. There's not as many days of clouds. So as a result of that, they are able to get higher yield per acre on those farms. And so the cost of those nuts are cheaper. So just, kind of geographically and biologically, things have fallen out in such a way that it really is true that the areas that grow the higher quality pecans can't get the yield per acre that the other places can get. So you do end up having to pay a little bit more for the Georgia source pecans.
Gotcha. Well, talk about on the nutrition front. I've heard all these things about antioxidants and fiber and zinc, and probably one of the most fascinating things. And I've eaten pecans my whole life. And from walking on the campus at Mississippi State outside the music building, we'd pick them up in a Kroger sack and you'd crack them with your, squeeze two of them together and do the whole thing. I've loved them, but then you start hearing about all these different health benefits. And then we were visiting with Dr. Randy Hudson the other day, and he takes out a lighter, breaks one into a third and lights it. And he just sits there and talks about how much energy is in a pecan while it's burning. I was like, what is going on here? That thing just burned like a candle wick. So talk about the nutrition side of that.
Yeah, I love to see Dr. Randy Hudson do that. It's a great demonstration of what's in a pecan nutrition-wise. Historically, people have not thought of pecans as a very nutritious food to eat. We make pies with them, but nobody's going to tell you that those are very healthy, right? You get your corn syrup and all the stuff. So that's been the perception of pecans. And while other nuts have promoted themselves as healthy and have become sort of the accepted standard of this is what you should snack on if you want a healthy snack, I think almonds, I think pistachios, pecans have sort of gotten a different image, but it's not an accurate image. And we started realizing this about 15 years ago. Loma Linda University did a study on the antioxidant levels of pecans and found that they have the highest level of any nut that we commonly eat. And that research has been backed up several times by Dr. Ron Pegg at the University of Georgia in a lot of different ways. And it's made its way out into the nutrition research. But then beyond that, too, pecans have a really great, really high level of healthy fats. They have a lot of fiber and they're very low carbs, which is another, the keto diet is so popular these days. You can tell I don't subscribe to the keto diet myself, a little too loose around the middle for that, but a lot of people do. And pecans and macadamia nuts are the two main nuts that, ketogenic diet followers like, because almonds have a higher level of carbohydrates. Pecans and mac nuts are low in carbs, high in healthy fats, high in fiber. So they're perfect for that diet too.
Huh. I wouldn't call myself keto, but I have definitely...
You've dabbled?
I've dabbled in changing my whole carb balance from the old Andy pre-40 and the new Andy that has to try to make it to 43 next year. I've found that you start paying attention to all that stuff. Pecans are in that mix for sure. And I didn't think that would be one of them.
Yeah. And look, you still don't need to go eat a whole can of pecans every day, right? It's healthy fat, but it is fat, So I'm not telling you to go eat a whole can a day, but eat a handful a day. They help a ton with feeling like you're full. It's a much better option than going and getting a bag of potato chips.
And if you're keto, by the way, you can throw a couple of tablespoons of butter in a skillet, and a handful of pecans and some sea salt.
Oof.
And then you will eat every dadgum one. I may have pushed the envelope a couple of times, a little past there.
I tell you what else you can do if you don't want to clean the skillet, and I maybe shouldn't say this because I know the audience is chefs, and you're probably gonna disagree, but I don't mind just putting some on a plate in the microwave for a couple minutes.
Yeah, somebody else told me that.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Robbie, have you
I use a toaster sometimes?
Toaster oven?
Yeah,
When I'm at home, yeah.
I'm just very averse to doing dishes.
Same.
Yeah,
We have that skillet on the eye that we always use, and so I pretty much just put a little bit of water, heat it up, and then wipe it out real good, and go again.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's a good point.
And so if you let it sit cold and you like try to wash it, it does one thing, but if you warm it up just a little bit, get that metal hot, everything just comes right off and ready to go again. I don't love doing dishes either. We can get into that later. I'm sure in the intro section that y'all will hear that will be recorded after this, Marianna will probably get on to me about dishes, but we'll get to that in a minute. All right. Coming up, got a few more things we're going to talk to RG and Robbie about. Y'all stick around. We'll be right back.
A few years ago, we were given the opportunity to taste test Georgia-grown pecans with some pastry chefs at our annual Sweetest Chefs event. We were blown away by the sweet nutty flavor and tender texture, and so were the pastry chefs who tried them. Plus, they boast far more antioxidants than any other nut, making them a nutritious, tasty snack or ingredient for both sweet and savory dishes. Learn more at georgiapecan.org or buy Georgia-grown pecans on our sister website, findfamilyfarms.com. That's findfamilyfarms.com.
All right, so we are back. RG has reappeared and brought us cans of beer.
It's true. I mean, you're here on my porch looking at the Ocmulgee River. I feel it's my responsibility as, a good Southern host to bring you some beer.
I mean, that's how it should go on a day like today. I mean, this is incredible view, incredible weather. I mean, you got it all dialed in, and the gunshots I was joking about earlier. There are actual gunshots in the distance, but it's either a deer hunter or a shooting range or something. But they're not that close, and y'all may not even hear them. It kind of adds to the ambiance. I love it. It makes you feel like you're really out in the middle of nowhere. Let's talk about this beer we just cracked open. Robbie, you're the culinary elite in the room for sure.
Should we tell them what the beer is?
I guess.
Yeah. Let's talk about what the beer is.
This is a Stuckey's Pecan Log Roll Beer. It was brewed at Wild Heaven Brewery in Atlanta, Georgia. We sent some pecans from our farm to Wild Heaven for the production of this beer. It's only the second time I've actually tasted it, and first time Robbie and Andy have tasted it. So I'm very curious to hear, what everybody thinks.
This is your second
This
time.
is my second tasting. Yeah.
Wow.
I do own 34 packs of this beer. So I hope I like it.
Probably more than that on the balance sheet, but at least in the fridge. So you've got a whole fridge just for Stuckey's beer.
That's right.
That's great. All right, so Robbie, you made some noises when you took that first taste.
I did. I'm not a beer connoisseur by any means, but I wasn't sure what to expect. I mean, I know what the flavors of a pecan log are, and I know what some beers taste like. But when I took my first sip, I was pleasantly surprised, to say the least. It's sweet without being overly sweet. You can definitely pick up the pecans in there. Mm-hmm. I kind of think of it as almost an amber mixed with a stout, in a sense. Pretty clean aftertaste. It's pretty good.
Yeah. The more I kind of ruminate on it, I'm getting sort of some caramel flavors. Y'all get that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
which is, that's fitting because a pecan log roll, in case you don't know, it's a nougat center dipped in caramel and wrapped in pecan pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So we definitely get the pecan. We definitely get the caramel.
There's kind of a marriage between almost like an A&W cream soda, and a Guinness. But it's not like a sweetie beer that you're going to, I mean, I don't know that you could drink 5 of these.
No.
This is kind of a.
Well, it's also 6% ABV. So
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. So yeah, I like that you got into so that's 12% alcohol. Huh?
Yeah. I know. I mean, to me, this is a great beer to nurse. Like and pecan log rolls are that way too, right? You don't want to just pound 6 pecan log rolls.
Right.
You would immediately, I don't know what would happen, but yeah, it's a great beer to nurse. I think definitely like the cream soda. I think that hits the nougat note for me. I think they did a great job actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that your everyday beer drinker will drink this as that's a special beer, and your beer nerd, your people that have to order a beer they never had every time they sit down, may jump on this one and order it again because it's got enough of a I don't know, it's not too crazy, but it's got enough of interesting going on that people are going to go, let's do that again.
My word for it is fun. It's a ton of fun to me. You know, I think they just did a remarkable job of capturing the pecan log roll and making a good beer out of it. It's pretty impressive. The
thing that first sip made me think of childhood, not that I drank a lot of beer as a child, but it had that whole like this, I felt like the Stuckey's brand is encapsulated in that taste.
Yeah.
And so you guys did a tremendous job. And so speaking of the Stuckey's brand, RG, you and Stuckey's, apparently you guys go way back, but talk about your role with Stuckey's.
Yeah, so I guess it's been maybe 3 months ago, one of our companies merged with Stuckey's when I became an owner of Stuckey's along with Stephanie Stuckey. I became the president of the company. So I'm spending a ton of my time now working on the renaissance of Stuckey's, bringing back a brand that has been as much an American icon as any other brand. For people who don't know Stuckey's, just a quick background. Started in 1938 by Mr. W.S. Stuckey, who, by the way, is the grandfather of Stephanie Stuckey. So it's still very much a family business. He had a bumper pecan crop on his orchard and needed a way to try to sell it. And so he opened a little roadside stand selling pecan log rolls, divinity, pralines, however you want to say it. That little pecan stand grew into a nationwide convenience store chain before there was such thing really as a convenience store. They were sort of the OG convenience store back when they were cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have a quick question, if I may. I need to settle a dispute. You mentioned the pronunciation of praline to praline.
Yes.
You say pecan. I say pecan. What do you say to the people that say pecans? Are they wrong?
You know, I would not want to say they're wrong as long as they're buying pecans. What my dad always told me is if you're buying them, they're pecans, and when you get ready to sell them, they become pecans.
Okay.
Yeah.
I heard somebody say the other day, you can charge more for a pecan
than
you
exactly
can for
right,
a pecan. Yeah. So I think the price per pound goes up when you figure out pecan.
I was hoping you were going to tell me how to pronounce the other P word that was
I say praline.
You say praline. Okay.
Mm,
Yeah.
may depend on how thick your southern drawl is.
Yeah.
Praline.
So if you're down in Louisiana, they call them de pralines. You know, it's prawl.
I feel like
P-R-A-W-L.
if it's pecan, it's a praline, and if it's pecan, it's a praline. Those just kind of go together to me.
I don't know. We may have to have a whole segment on that. We
may have to be a whole episode.
We'll have to get an English professor in here and somebody who's a historian. We get John Folse to give us a little bit of background on it from the historic, all the things I'm sure we could cover there. All right, well, let's talk about, Robbie, you being a chef have probably cooked and used pecans more ways than any of us by far. But talk about the way that the culinary world is using pecans these days and kind of things you're doing, things you're seeing that could be done with pecans.
Well, it's a very versatile product, to say the least. Everybody recognizes it as being used for sweet applications, whether it's cakes or pies or what have you. But, it's easily crossed over to savory applications. And for instance, we have a dish in our current menu that one of the garnishes is a sage and pecan pesto. So, it could just be used in a lot of different ways. Sky's the limit, really.
sage and pecan pesto.
Mm-hmm.
And what's that on?
We do a pumpkin congee, which is like a rice porridge.
Right.
And then it's garnished with the sage and pecan pesto and some roasted pumpkin. And
I'm trying to mentally go there because I always think about sage with sausage gravy on a biscuit, like with fresh sage in it.
Mhm.
But then going pecan and then pesto.
Well, you got the pumpkin in there. So that pumpkin says fall to me and sage says fall to me.
Mhm.
So that, yeah.
Sage works really well with a lot of the fall squash, winter squash, and so do pecans. You know,
That's
they all go hand in hand. I mean, it is the
Absolutely.
season for all those ingredients. You know, so
Is sage I don't know the answer to this, but is sage a late fall, like in its normal environment? Is that when it's really?
I think it has a stigma of falling into that season. I mean, it's available all year. There's different types of sage where it can change up. You know, there's pineapple sage or mammoth sage or whatever type of application you want to use it for. And so much like pecans are, you know.
Yeah.
So
Right.
That sounds like a great dish. Have you done any pecan crusted fish or any
sure.
proteins
Chicken.
like that? Chicken.
Yeah. Just numerous things over the years. I mean, you know, it's hard to find originality in cooking these days with the amount of chefs that's out there, and people are always experimenting and trying to create something new or recreate the wheel or whatever. So my goal is to just put out good tasting food, you know, keep it pretty simple, you know, not too fussy or not too pretentious, and use common ingredients, you know, that everybody recognizes, and hopefully spark a bit of nostalgia, kind of like the Stuckey's brand or the Pecan Log Roll Beer that we're having, you know, kind of brings you back to a certain place, you know, fond memory or whatever. So
Reminds you of that scene in Ratatouille when the guy has the ratatouille that reminds him of his childhood. I'm sure y'all seen that movie.
About 416.
Yeah, I mean, all the chefs listening to this are like,
well,
yeah, that's right.
9 and a 6-year-old, yeah, quite a few times.
But that's so true, right? If it reminds you of something that's dear to you,
Hmm.
Instantly it tastes better.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if it reminds you of like a wicked stepmother or something like that, going back to other Disney movie things, then you're like, oh, I hate this.
Hmm.
So that's funny. So RG, you mentioned earlier working with the Taiwanese chefs. You traveled, I guess, to many countries at this point doing the pecan business. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. I guess on pecan business, trying to promote pecans, China, Taiwan, Turkey, India, been my main destinations. But that's just me. I mean, pecan industry people have been working on a lot of markets for sure.
So what is it that I'm trying to connect the dots where international chefs are chomping at the bit to get their hands on a product that a lot of times we in America don't even buy because the thing we're getting in the grocery stores doesn't taste like what you're selling right down the road.
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons for that. One is pecan is just such an American product. Every other nut you think of typically has been brought to this country and propagated here, but did not originate here. Pecan is the only nut that is truly American. It originated in the Mississippi River Delta, like we were talking about earlier. You know, the Native Americans who were here thousands of years ago based their whole patterns of migration and, you know, where they were planning on being around the masting of the pecan trees for certain years. You know, pecan trees are what we call alternate bearing. So you have a big crop one year and then an off crop. So they were, you know, even the Native Americans were aware of that, and they based their patterns on that. So it's just such an intrinsically American thing. I think for international audiences who are trying to capture a little bit of what America is about, pecan means something in that regard. Another thing is they have no preconceived notions about what pecans are. You know, kind of like Robbie was saying, historically it's been a sweet thing. It's been in cakes or breads or pies or pralines, some kind of confection. International folks don't think that at all. They've got a completely clean slate, and so they've been able to adapt it into their own cuisines very easily. And Turkey, for example, comes to mind, where they eat baklava. They've had a lot of fun working on pecan baklavas, different things that they make there. And then I think, too, the country that has imported the most has been China. They imported mostly in-shell pecans because they have a sort of cultural backstory where they've been eating in-shell hickory nuts for a long time. That's a really important part of their holiday festivities. They gather around a table as a family, and they have a bowl of hickory nuts that they crack open by hand and consume. So they buy the pecans in shell, but what that does is the consumer gets a really fresh pecan because of that. There's no better packaging for a pecan than the shell that it grows in, right? So when your consumer is buying it in the shell and eating it, they're getting a really fresh pecan. So if you're accustomed to buying pecans at a big box grocer in the United States that have been sitting there for 18 months and, they look dark as the pecans we were talking about earlier, you're not really getting the best quality that you could be getting.
You mentioned earlier, and Robbie, you may can chime in on this from the food service side of this, but you mentioned like properly stored. What does that mean for you as far as, you're picking up thousands of pounds of pecans off the ground right now, you're cleaning them, you're sorting them, you're putting them in those totes. What does proper storage mean for pecans on this side of the market? Like they're not actually out into the market. What do you do?
One nice thing is that when we harvest pecans, it's usually pretty cool out. So right now it's middle of November, temperatures are falling pretty good. So we're fine keeping them in the big 2,000 pound, what we call super sacks. It's a big poly bag basically. And they're in the shell. So again, that's the best packaging you can ask for. From us, it's going to go to some sort of processor, usually a shelling plant if it's in the United States. And they're going to either put that nut in a freezer when they get it until they're able to shell it, or they're going to shell it immediately and then ship that product or put that product in a freezer. People have this conception that, I've got to have new crop. And I understand where that comes from because that's true with so many different commodities. But in the case of pecans, if they've been stored in a freezer, you will not be able to tell the difference in the crop. They keep exceptionally well in a freezer. We have pecans right now in our family deep freezer that I know are 5 years old if they're 1 year old, and I could bring that out right now and put it next to this year's crop, and you would not be able to pick out the difference.
Wow. And I think that's neat because inside the pecan, you've got and maybe one of y'all knows all the scientific words for the little part that makes you, if you leave a little piece in there, it makes your mouth go,
oh man, it's the worst thing. We call it a wafer, but
yeah, but it's so tightly nestled around that. And then one of the things I've heard about, the higher oil content and all that means that that's where a lot of your flavor is. We were talking about earlier, the terrible practice of smashing a burger with paper towels to get all that extra grease out and how that takes so much of the actual flavor. And so I feel like there's something about all those things jammed up and then it's got the hard shell on there. It seems like God put a pretty good little package around it to keep it.
Yeah, he had that thing figured out pretty good if you can just keep it in the shell.
So food service wise, I noticed one of the pecan places we were at they were vac sealing like 25-pound bags with already shelled pieces or shelled halves. Robbie, I know chefs do a ton of vac sealing on things to keep them fresh and last longer or whatever. You guys discuss amongst yourselves the vac sealing and, if you get a 25-pound of box of pecans, would you just hang on to that and you walk in and vac seal it in between, or what would you do there?
I personally don't vacuum pack shelled nuts. They go right to freezer. Correct me if I'm wrong, but, because of the fat content, room temperature, light can cause a nut to go rancid really fast. And so by storing it in the freezer, not only does it prevent that, but also locks in the nutrients and, the valuable parts of the nut as well. Not to mention, you pay a proper price for a quality product as well. And so you definitely don't want anything to spoil on you or, then you lose that and then there goes your food costs. So, but as back to the vacuum sealing part, I don't know that there's anything wrong with it to speak of. I just, we go straight from delivery to freezer. So,
yeah.
I mean, I'm a farmer. I'm not a storage expert, but I have picked up some things along the way. So I think the things that cause the product to taste off, you've got light and you've got gas, right? So if it's stored in cellophane, light easily comes through the cellophane, and gas, believe it or not, also can penetrate the cellophane. Because what's happening, from my understanding, is that the fat in the pecans is oxidizing. That happens when it's exposed to oxygen, right? So the thing that vacuum sealing does is it pulls most of the oxygen out of the bag when you seal it, and so it's not exposed to that. So it does help, but without doubt, freezing, in my experience, and we've done both, freezing works a lot better. It lasts a lot longer. Yeah.
I have frozen them in a vac sealing bag, and and I don't know, that they look awesome like that too, because it's like they're, I feel like anything I can vac seal and freeze, I just like that better, because I feel like you don't get those little granules of freezer burn or little, where it's humid where we are. So anything is going to have all this extra moisture in there, and I like to get it out. Good tips. You guys ready for the lightning round?
Let's do it. Yeah.
It's going to be fast. It's going to hit you quick.
Oof.
This is actually one of my favorite things, because I feel like you get to know lots of different things from different perspectives and kind of keep people on their toes. But you can answer, short answers, or if you have a story or a memory associated with any of these, you can. If it gets too emotional, I've got some Kleenex in there, Robbie, and you can't pass, but we will pause it and let you get a hold of your emotions,
Okay,
and
we
can get you another beer if we need to, whatever we need to do. All right, so let's start with first pecan memory. We're going to start with you, Mr. Lamar.
I do remember as a kid sitting on the front porch of our family's home. I don't know if it's the first time I ever tried pecans, but it's the first time I remember it. And, my mom and dad showed me the whole thing, how you take two in your hand and crack them together. And I remember tasting them and thinking, this is what our family is about. This is how we earn a living. Yeah, I mean, it's seared in my memory. Definitely a clear memory for me. Yeah.
And I notice how you work the words front porch into that. Says the
that
owner.
may even have something to do with why that brand is out
Front
there.
Porch
Yeah.
Pecan Company. All right, that's fair enough. Okay. All right, Chef Robbie.
I would have to say around Christmas time, my grandmother's house, she had the customary mixed bowl of nuts, and there was a plethora of things in there, some I couldn't even identify to this day probably. But I would always pick out the pecans, and then it was, for some reason, they always had the nutcracker there, and and we would just sit there and crack nuts and eat them all day long.
That's interesting. We did the exact same thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Probably the same nutcracker. It has the braided engraving on the outside.
Yeah.
Yep. And if you miss and get a piece of your finger in that bad boy, it does not.
It doubles as a lobster claw cracker. And,
Yeah, that's
right. Yeah.
Yep. You can do a lot with that. That's pretty funny. That's bringing me back to my grandparents' place in Bowden, Georgia, where they did that. That was not my first pecan memory, but that's definitely a fun one.
Andy, are you going to answer the lightning round questions?
I may throw in a little. I mean,
right.
I've done the lightning round with a lot of people. We kind of tweak the lightning round every time we do it so that it's a little bit different. But there are some right and wrong answers on the lightning round. So we're going to go see how Robbie does with the next one. Robbie, biscuits or cornbread? RG, you might want to go get the Kleenex.
I see the wheels.
Can't believe you're going to make me choose a side.
Jamming up right now.
Can I say depends on the situation?
Well, and I'm going to clarify.
His mom and his wife.
I'm going to clarify that cornbread does not have sugar in it. Also,
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that would make it an obvious choice if it did.
Okay. All right. So Robbie's still on the fence there. I feel like he's trying to pick his favorite child or something,
Yeah.
All right. We'll come back to you in a minute on that one. All right. So RG, where do you go? Biscuits or cornbread?
I am 100% a cornbread man. God, we grew up eating those, we called them corn pones, but I think it was nothing more than cornmeal and water and salt, oil in the cast iron skillet, and you pour it in there and you get this just delicious oily cornbread with little holes in it, and it's crispy around the edges.
It's kind of
savory.
like almost like a pancake, but
It's like
cornbreadish.
pancake, yeah.
Cornbread
But it's crispy. They make them too that are floppy. Not as big a fan as that. I like a good crispy one.
We call those Johnny cakes or hoe cakes.
Okay, yeah.
There you go. All right. Favorite barbecue? You got ribs, brisket, pulled pork, or chicken?
Pulled pork.
Same.
There we go. Favorite cut of steak?
Like everyday consumption, ribeye.
All right. For special occasion, like this is your creme de la creme, Thomas Keller is going to cook you a steak.
Spinalis, which is ribeye cap.
Ribeye cap. There you go. The decal, as Jeremiah Bacon calls it.
Pecan farmer over here has never heard that word in his life.
Spinalis? You
Spinalis. That's a new one on me.
So you know the ribeye has like the middle part, and then it's got that wheel out on the outside,
which we all know is the better part, right? They're really tender. Yeah.
If it's done right, it's amazing. All right. So what's your favorite there, RG?
I like a ribeye. Just the flavor, all that fat's just wonderful.
All right. So Robbie, you can have dinner with any three people, alive or deceased. Who are you inviting to your dinner?
I might need to get those tissues again. Definitely my grandfather. One of the chefs I never got the fortune to work for, but I've always admired and has passed is Charlie Trotter.
Yep.
Just in my mind, a brilliant man that was basically doing farm to table before anybody knew what farm to table was. Kind of like a pioneer of sorts. And third, Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan. A friend of mine goes fishing with Michael Jordan. I don't know if I could help with Charlie, but if I could introduce you to him or to my friend. It's wild.
Yeah.
MJ, what about Michael Jordan? Is it that?
Well, my stature kind of gives away that I was a basketball player way back when.
Okay.
And I remember his days at UNC Chapel Hill. I remember his first Jordans that came out I had as a kid.
Oh, wow.
I have a pair now of the retros, and I have several other pairs, so I'm kind of collecting them, so to speak. And so it's just, it's just a fond memory, of that period of my life,
Yeah.
So sports was a big thing to me back then. And then I got into eating and cooking, and my body said otherwise. So,
those two things don't go well together. I can attest. Even golf can be a challenge when you get old and slow.
Sometimes I think back like what would have been, but everything happens for a reason. So
yeah. All right, RG.
So I'll do one sports one too. I played college golf a little bit and still really enjoy golf a lot. And probably the golfer I would most like to have dinner with would be Bobby Jones.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so what I admire about him, he never turned pro, right? He was always an amateur. So for him, it was the love of the sport. I relate with that. I love competition for the sake of competition, sport for the sake of sport. And I think he's a kindred spirit in that. But he was, of course, excellent. And so I like the way he was so well-rounded. And then I'm going to say... This is you may laugh at this, but T.E. Lawrence, which is Lawrence of Arabia, right? So the kind of British guy who was in the area around the Holy Land during World War I. I just think he's such a fascinating character in history, and the life he lived. At that time, there weren't a lot of Europeans going to that part of the world.
Oh, yeah. Just
the stories he would have to tell of like that culture at that time, to me, I would love to just hear the stories that man would have to tell. And then last, probably my great, inspiration for a lot of my way of living and life would be Wendell Berry. I'd love to be able to sit down with that man. And there's so many things I've read in his books that I have questions about that have filled me with longing and wonder and desire, but seem to me so hard to actually make reality in the modern world that we live in. So I'd love to ask him some questions.
Man, you guys went deep on that. We're gonna have to wrap up on that one. No, we got a couple more here. All right. So favorite liquid pairing with a meal?
Depends on the meal.
With your steak. How about that?
Okay.
Go ahead and go so Robbie has time to think.
I don't have a whole lot of options to think through. I'm sure Robbie's got a whole encyclopedia going on over there. But, I mean, if I'm going to have a ribeye, I'm going to have some kind of red wine, and it's probably going to be a Bordeaux or something like that if I had a choice. And that, I don't know if that's a sophisticated answer, but that's what the old pecan farmer likes.
There you go. All right, Robbie.
Sometimes I like to mix it up, like bourbons with steaks. Sometimes, it depends on the preparation, of course. Certain beers. I've never really had a love affair with wine for some reason. I try it. I drink it. I know a little bit about it. Not a sommelier by any means, but right. I think it's, as a chef, for me, it's more challenging to pair something with beers or spirits than it is wine. And so that's why I kind of gravitate towards one of those. Not real big on like cocktails by any either, like fruity ones or like a good old fashioned.
I don't even read the cocktail menu anymore. I'm just like, no, if it's good, just put it over a piece of ice or neat, bring me some ice and I'll.
Well, let me taste the
let me taste
itself.
The actual the what's going on in there, and then I'll drink one if somebody orders.
Can I ask a question that's tangential to that?
Oh yes.
What do y'all recommend to serve at Thanksgiving to drink?
Are you with your in-laws or your close family? I'm going to my in-laws, so no, I don't think they listen. I'm kidding. I love y'all.
I struggle with this because I like red wine, obviously by my answer, but when I've served it at Thanksgiving, it doesn't. I can
look
tell
at you funny because they're like,
great with the turkey.
But you got all the cranberry stuff, and you got. I mean, dark meat is basically not even. I go by the rule, like, serve what people like to drink, and they're going to enjoy it with whatever.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
But we've done so many wine dinners and things where everything is paired. And there is a magical moment when you have that perfect Chardonnay with this fish. That,
I've had the experience. I just don't know why or how to replicate it.
But that's not usually what I'm trying to do when I'm trying to get Thanksgiving dinner done. It's just... everybody needs something to take the edge off, and especially this year, like who doesn't need to just quit thinking about the world just for a minute and enjoy and be thankful for all the things God's given us.
So just put a bottle of wild turkey on the table.
I think wild turkey may be the right answer. If there was no wrong answer, but wild turkey 101 could be the right. Yeah. And then I guess from there, tangentially, anything Eddie Russell has done is probably going to pair well. All right, so favorite pecan use on an entree, and then favorite pecan use in dessert. And I'm going to go ahead and chime in here while y'all think.
Okay.
One of my favorite things to do with pecans, and this is brand new in my pecan eating and using world since we went to Pecan Ridge Plantation 3 years ago, and I was introduced to pecan oil, and I never liked oil and vinegar salad dressings, and I started taking pecan oil, vinegar, salt and pepper, and some preserves of some sort. And people would say, oh my gosh, this is the best salad dressing ever because it's so light and clean and fresh. It didn't have the kind of that muddy olive oil, kind of that mouthfeel that you get. And so that's kind of my pecan secret weapon. I love pecans a lot of different ways, but that pecan oil, it's one of the under talked about things in the pecan industry. I love it. It's expensive, but it is. But man, it's good.
Super good. Yeah, we use it a ton. I keep 2 oils in my kitchen at home. We've got, just a good high quality olive oil, and then we've got pecan oil. And you can get a lot of different kinds of pecan oil, but
oh yeah, and I like the more refined pecan oil. So Pecan Log
Plantation does a good version of the more refined.
There you go.
And it's excellent.
All right, but we're talking about your favorite entree and your favorite dessert with pecan. Favorite confection with pecan, Robbie?
As a snack, I like to candy pecans and add a little heat to it, whether it's cayenne or whatever. And I've actually used that in savory dishes as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a balance. Like we used to have a pork belly appetizer on the menu, and we would do candy pecans. And I don't recall what else we did with it, but that's always a fave.
Yeah.
The problem is keeping the staff from eating it. So
I know that feeling at the house. Yeah. Staff gets a little crazy.
I mean, you really can't beat just a good old-fashioned pecan pie either, you know?
Yeah.
If it's made right. I know Golden Eagle syrup is a big thing in Alabama, and so I've had, North Carolina style, and then got to Alabama and had it with the Golden Eagle, and it's my fave.
Well, obviously they do it wrong in North Carolina anyway, but anyhow. Just kidding. All the North Carolina people, don't stop listening. We still love you.
I use it everywhere that I can, whether it's replacing a certain type of nut in a traditional recipe with pecan or whatever.
All right.
I'm going to say, as far as entrees go, any entree is great with pecans. The key to making it good, in my opinion, is the texture of the pecan. So where I think people go wrong is applications where the pecans get soggy.
Okay.
And I might be, this might be my opinion, nobody else's, but when they get soggy, to me, you can't taste the nuttiness. You don't get really the joy of what pecans are all about when they get soggy. You got to preserve the texture. So one way that's done that, it's probably the obvious answer, but I mean, there's a pecan crusted trout. Gosh, I'm blanking on the name of the restaurant.
In New Orleans?
No, it's in Atlanta, in like Villa Rica area. I can't think of the name of the restaurant. It's too bad. Anyway, they do a phenomenal pecan crusted trout, and it's a thick layer of pecans on there, and they get it super crispy. Man, I love that thing. Confection, I'm going to go with since I say pecan, I'm going to say praline. Have y'all ever had one that's kind of got an umami to it? Like that to me is a great praline.
There you go.
Yeah.
I like it. All right. Well, we're down to the last two. So, RG, in your vast enterprise of Stuckey and farming and managing the 30-something employees on one side of on the world, and you got other sides of the world here, what inspires you? What motivates you to keep trucking and to do the things you're doing?
Man, a lot of things do. I love what we do. And that's kind of a part of my story we hadn't really talked about. But when I moved home, I thought I might get into politics. Believe it or not, I thought I might run for office. Dad persuaded me to try farming for a year and see if I liked it. At the end of that year, there was just no question in my mind what I wanted to do. I loved farming pecans. I still do. I think I always will. It's just something beautiful about the orchards, the way the seasons come and go. I like everything about it. And then also my family. We had a little girl. She's 17 months old. I want to create something that'll be here for her and for my wife and our family for generations to come.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Robbie.
Can you repeat the question, please?
What keeps you trucking? I mean, and look, let me frame up this question with saying, so we're at the, I don't know, 8th month, 9th month or something of this crazy pandemic where chefs have taken a beating from the market, from their mayors and governors and, restrictions and rules. And you guys have tried to continue to play limbo with an ever moving bar. So my hat is off to every one of you guys who have managed to stick it out and continue to adapt. But in the midst of that, you could have said, all right, I need to go sell insurance. I need to go sell cars. I need, something for either for a more solid financial thing or just for some mental health. But you're in the kitchen and you're rocking it at the Hound in Auburn. And I think you mentioned you guys are at some lesser percentage than 100 as far as your occupancy, but you're still doing it. What is it that has kept you going?
Well, at the end of the day, it's hope. Hope that things are going to get better, Certainly this isn't the end-all, be-all. Just hoping that things will get back to normal and whatever new normal that is. And, we just have to adjust and pivot, as the trending word is. But aside from that, it's, I have a personal responsibility to my staff, to the owners, to everybody involved, and, where guest satisfaction comes into play, but as well as employee satisfaction. To be a good leader, your staff looks up to you to teach them, to guide them, to make them better at what they do. And so for that, you know, I hold myself to a higher standard and just want to be known as, you know, not just being a decent person, but a good leader and a good boss and somebody that hopefully somebody can look up to.
Yeah.
So from a food standpoint, I'm just one of those guys where I need almost immediate results, you know, so the ends justify the means pretty quickly in the food industry, you know, when it comes to creating dishes or writing menus. And once that's done, then you hand it off to your customers and to see their faces light up, you know, because, you know, mind blown, hopefully, you know.
Right.
You know, it's just, there's no better feeling than that. So that's the one element that keeps me coming back.
There you go.
It's good stuff.
Yeah. All right. So 1 year from today, I have a 27 Bordeaux or some whatever your favorite bottle is there, RG. What are we celebrating when we open that?
How far from now did you say?
1 year from now.
1 year. Man, and everything's revolved around my new role with Stuckey's. You know, if we have reminded Americans what Stuckey's was and have given them a new way to identify with that brand, I'll be very happy. Crack a bottle.
All right, Robbie, 1 year from now, we're rolling up into the Hound or some other venture. What are we celebrating?
Well, I mentioned before, normalcy.
Yeah. Amen, brother.
The freedom to not have to wear a mask when you're entering a restaurant.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of irons in the fire, some ideas we're pursuing. Our latest concept that we're building is a noodle shop, Chubby Belly noodle shop. And that's kind of like a ramen joint. So we're, given the times, we're kind of building slowly, doing pop-ups and takeovers and in search of a food truck right now. And then hopefully have a brick and mortar shop sooner than later. So,
well, thank you guys so much for being on the Eat Y'all podcast. And it's been a real treat to be out here. RG, tell folks how they can find out more about you and Georgia Pecans and everything you got going on here.
Yeah, thanks. You can just go to georgiapecans.org and click on the Find a Supplier button. And there's a whole list of great Georgia pecan suppliers right on there.
And Robbie?
So the Hound is located in downtown Auburn, Alabama. If you're familiar with Auburn, Toomer's Corner is a pretty familiar landmark. We are located actually behind. Used to be kind of a hidden gem, but the secret's out now. So we have a website you can also go to online. It's thehound-auburn.com. And you can check out our menus, and we have some merch available as well. Some pretty cool T-shirts.
Some great T-shirts. Some of the best T-shirts in the whole restaurant world.
Oh, thank you very much. Designed by yours truly.
My favorite, by the way, you can find this. It says bacon and bourbon on the front, and it's a black T-shirt. It's very slimming. I'm throwing that out there because every time I've worn it, outside the house, obviously, Marianna stopped commenting on it. But if you walk around with that in public, people are going to go, oh my gosh, I love that shirt. Where'd you get that? And then I turn around and walk away. Because on the back, it says The Hound, Auburn, Alabama.
There you go. Yeah, we got a couple of trucker hats available, and we just came out with some socks, too, that are pretty neat.
Can't wait to get into those. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Eat Y'all podcast, hosted by Eat Y'all founder and chief relationship officer, Andy Chapman. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to us if you'd join us in our mission to save family farms by subscribing and leaving a review. Even better, share this episode and follow us on your favorite social media account at Let's Eat Y'all.